Joseph, one of Jacob's 12 sons, was a man who suffered years of adversity and suffering through no fault or doing of his own. He was hated by his brothers, sold into slavery, and imprisoned, though he had done nothing to deserve any of these things. It is the predetermined plan and foreknowledge of God. Joseph remained faithful to God through all of the hardships he endured, even though he could have had no idea at the time why God had allowed these things to happen to him. God was working in his life to prepare him and to bring him to the place where he would do the work that he had determined Joseph would do in his service, work which would bear fruit to his glory. Joseph, favored by his father, but hated by his brothers, Joseph sold into slavery, by his own brothers, Joseph imprisoned, Joseph brought before Pharaoh for Pharaoh's dream interpretation. Pharaoh and his officials approved of Joseph's plan. When they considered Joseph's wisdom in interpreting Pharaoh's dreams and in devising the plan to save the country from ruin during the famine that was to come, they decided there would be no one better than Joseph to manage this effort. Pharaoh then put Joseph in charge of his palace and the whole land of Egypt, saying that all of the people of Egypt were to submit to his orders and direction. Joseph was made second in command over all of Egypt, subject only to Pharaoh himself. Why all of this undeserved suffering in Joseph's life? Suffering and adversity in his life. We know that God is all-powerful and that nothing is too hard for him, and we might ask why he did not bring all of this about in some other way, some easier way. One thing you should know: what Scripture says, truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. God's sovereign will for each of us individually is revealed through the things that he brings about in our lives and through the things that he allows to happen to us. And through some of these we will suffer the loss, or the death, of things that we want for ourselves in life. This timeless and universal principle of spiritual fruit-bearing, ordained by God, is the reason that Joseph had to endure the undeserved sufferings he experienced in order to bear the fruit of saving the family of Jacob through the famine that he brought about. Looking back, Joseph came to understand why God had brought about all of these painful events in his life. Joseph had come to understand the sovereignty of God in all that had happened to him, and it was given to him to see the good that God brought about through the unjust sufferings he endured. Joseph said to his brothers, "Do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. So therefore, do not be afraid, I will provide for you and your little ones." So he comforted his brothers who put him into a pit. Joseph had also come to understand that God is working for good through the events and circumstances which he allows to touch the lives of his people, even when the intent of others is to do harm by their actions. We as believers have this same assurance that everything our sovereign God allows to affect our lives is working together for our good and for our eternal glory. Be strong and courageous in your sufferings, knowing that it's all God's plan and he will bring you out of this, for his glory. May God bless you.